Glenn Whitley, County Judge.
Here.
Roy C. Brooks, Commissioner Precinct 1.
Present.
Marty Van Ravensway, Commissioner Precinct 2.
Here.
Gary Fickus, Commissioner Precinct 3.
Here.
J.D. Johnson, Commissioner Precinct 4.
Here.
Constitutes a quorum.
Thank you. Our invocation this morning will be delivered by Dr. Joel McCoy from First Baptist Church of Crowley. McCoy, appreciate you coming out today. Thank you. Please remain standing for the pledges afterwards.
Lord, thank you that you grant wisdom in times like these. And I pray for this judge and these commissioners that they'll have wisdom as they deliberate, and that you'll bless them and bless this city and bless everybody who participates today, that you'll guide and be honored and pleased with what happens. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Dr. McCoy.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have several announcements for the court as relates to the agenda. The first is under the administrator section of items A1 and 2. This concerns the prohibition of outside burning and also an extension of the declaration of disaster. Upon recommendation by the Fire Marshal and Emergency Management Coordinator, we are not going to ask that you take any action today on this, and we want to thank Randy Renoir for the rain one more time. It seems like every time we put this thing up, it starts raining.
Good.
So, but if there's a need to do this, we'll come back in 2 weeks to do that. Also, members of the court, under the Sheriff's Department, item 7J1, this concerns the jail inmate commissary service agreement. There is a correction on the agreement itself. It's simply the date that the contract was executed. It was July 20th instead of June 20th, so we've made that one correction. Also, we'd like to remind the court and the other members of the county family that we will not be having Commissioners Court next Tuesday. That our next court meeting is going to be the first Tuesday in August. Then also, members of court, on that next court meeting, we intend to have a briefing concerning the Trinity River Vision, the Uptown project, and we'll have that for the court's information. It'll be just a briefing item. You've been reading something about it in the paper recently, and it's time that we come to court and brief you on that. Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Manius. Court members, you have before you the minutes of our regular meeting of July the 14th. Move approval. Second. We have a motion to second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. We have before you the consent agenda. Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. Members of the court, we have some additional items to bring to the court.
Excuse me, Mr. Manius.
Yes.
Your Honor. On the two items, the burn ban that we have removed from the agenda.
Yes.
Should it become a critical issue within the next 2 weeks, the county judge has the authority to declare an emergency?
Yes.
Is that correct?
Yes, and those emergencies last for 7 days, can be extended on action of the Commissioner's Court. So we were going to use that if in case things got a little drier.
Because things can get drier in a hurry in 105-degree heat.
And I might say that the reason that the Fire Marshal made the recommendation is because we have 30 to 40% chance of precipitation this next week. Also, it's our understanding that temperatures are not supposed to get above 100. In fact, they're going to be in the low 90s. That was the reason for his recommendation.
From your lips to God's ears.
Well, I think I actually signed an emergency last week before the rains
Last Friday.
came. So I guess
That'll stay in effect until this coming Friday.
until it's coming Friday.
Yes.
Okay. Of course, it'll rain every day between now and then get.
How did I miss that,
How did you miss what?
that you made that declaration?
Well, she comes in and tells me I have to sign this piece of paper, and I sign it.
I understand, but how does Joe Blow know not to burn trash or burn brush?
We do contact the media and use
They send it
public
out via
service
email.
announcements.
Well, Joe Blow doesn't have an email.
We're going to talk about that during briefing today. Not to just, no, you're going to talk about send it now. Is that covered? Is that one of the things that we could send out?
Okay. And we can talk about it a little later.
We can even include him in those, can't we?
Yeah, we can send it to yourself. The declaration for disaster.
Melissa, you're going to come up and talk about it.
I didn't bring my stool.
Pull that mic down.
The declaration for disaster doesn't actually include the burn ban. It allows us to request assistance whenever we have those larger fires. So there wasn't an actual burn ban placed into order, just the declaration for emergency or disaster.
So as of this moment, we cannot burn
No, you can,
through Friday.
No. As of this moment, we have the ability to request state assistance and and be able to make a request for reimbursement per the declaration of emergency.
I think I misstated it when I implied that I had issued a burn ban. I think what it was is that it was the emergency disaster
Right.
thing that we did, so there's not a burn. You can burn your trash, you're okay, you're not going to be illegal. We won't send the
I don't
constable out
burn
after you.
trash, but I have noticed several people burning some brush carefully.
Mr. Manius, would you like to move along with your agenda?
Yes, I would. Your Honor, members of the court, on item number 3, we're requesting that the court approve an MOU between Tarrant County and the Texas Department of Public Safety as it relates to the Texas Court ID project.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Your Honor, members of the court, on item number 4, this is an item that we discussed last week. It concerns the Health Risk Assessment Initiative Award Program. In your electronic file and also in your hard copy file, we have provided a court communication that establishes that program. What we're requesting today is for the Commissioners Court to approve the 2009 Incentive Award Program for completion of the HRA by full-time employees. The effective date of that should be today.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Members of the court, on item number 5, this is the Texas Legislative regular session update. Mr. Mendez is here to address the court at this time.
Morning, Your Honor, members of the court. We are asking that the court receive and file the final report for the regular session, the first call special session. As you will note, this is 182 pages of riveting reading that I'm sure you will take to bed tonight. What we've done is just basically do a brief analysis by the county department of all the bills that did pass and did become law. This is not all my analysis. This is a compilation of analysis that came from Association of Counties, from CUC, and other sources, as well as our own county departments that gave us feedback throughout the course of the legislative session. The only two things that happened with any direct impact on Tarrant County since my last report was that two of our issues were vetoed by the governor. One is part of the comprehensive county omnibus bill, and one was an issue that came to us from the district judges regarding the expunction of criminal charges. We'll have to take another shot at that next session. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Was Jim Allison included in?
Absolutely. A lot of his comments were incorporated in a lot of this analysis as well.
I guess the other thing that I point out, sometimes we're questioned as to why we're down there lobbying and talking with the legislature, and I think this is just an indication. Here's 180-something pages. These are bills that affect us on a daily basis, affect the way we run and the operations that we do, and affect the amount of money that we have to spend in order to comply with these new laws, and that's why it is so critical that not only we have Mr. Mendez, but other folks down there working on our behalf, and from time to time ourselves. I know Commissioner Johnson and several of us were down there on a number of bills this session, and I think it's just, it is important to realize that sometimes those folks don't quite understand the impact of what they may be passing when it comes to actually making it happen back home. And so I appreciate very much the time you spend and others spend toward that effort in Austin.
I guess you saw yesterday, I believe it was in the paper, where the governors had their conference and they're complaining to Washington about unfunded mandates to states. I hope now they realize when we holler unfunded mandates what we're hollering about, but it seems like they're getting a little bit of what
they're able to tell us, though, that it's a local issue.
Yeah.
It's amazing how local stops at the state when they're looking at stuff.
I move to receive and file the report.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Thanks again, Mark.
Members of the court, there is one item as it relates to our legislative session that I would like to talk to the court about very briefly. As you know, the legislature gave us a new criminal district court, the 432nd. That legislation goes into effect in September. There is a rider in the appropriations bill on all of the new criminal district courts that they do not actually go into effect until the commissioners' courts of those counties indicate what day they should be effective. And so that is one item that we need to talk to you all about as we go through the budget process. As you know, we included are going to include in the FY10 budget the funding for the prosecution element and the clerk element and the sheriff element on that, and that has a 10/1 initiation date. So I know there's items that IT has to deal with as far as setting up that court system, and in the next several weeks we want to be talking to you about when we actually want to trigger the beginning of that court. It deals everything from not only bringing on personnel, but setting the system so that cases can be assigned to that court, the reassignment of cases from different criminal courts to that court to balance that caseload. So those are items that as we go through August and probably the first part of August that we're going to talk to you all about so that we can get a date that you all want to start this process.
Does that have any bearing on when the governor makes the appointment of that?
The statute says that state revenues cannot be expended until the Commissioner's Court sets a start date. So there's a possibility. I don't know that answer specifically, and that's something we might want to look at. But this court, even though the statute makes that, or it comes into effect September 1, our funding piece for the staff that supports that is not coming online until October 1. So, and I know that facilities is in the process of bringing those secure elevators up and putting the holding cells in those two courtrooms over there. So we just need to make sure we coordinate it so we have everything in place whenever that court actually starts hearing cases.
Refresh my memory about the elevators. When are we anticipating that will be?
If everything goes on time, then mid to late September is when we're looking for a completion date on that. It may slip We're dealing with elevator companies, but right now, everything is still on time, and so we're looking at mid to late September.
Okay.
Have
And
you had a chance to, changing subject, but have you had a chance to review that legislation I sent to you?
yes, I sure have.
Okay.
And I'll be more than happy to talk to you about that.
Mr. Lane is going to be requesting, Jim Lane is going to be requesting to get on the agenda to
Yes.
visit with the court about it, so.
Yeah. I did look at it, Commissioner, and we have some suggestions on that.
Okay.
Okay.
Is that with regards to this new court, or is it just different? Okay. All right.
Members of the Court, if we could go to item number 6, we're requesting that the court consider approval of exceptions from the travel policy for overnight lodging in the North Central Texas region. We provided that in your court communication. All of these are personnel out of the district courts. I will tell you that all of this travel has already occurred, and they are now seeking approval. The auditor's office has refused to make these payments until court has approved these items.
They've already done this, and now they're asking for it.
That's correct.
Any particular reason why they didn't ask for approval prior to the seminars and meetings?
No, I believe they simply forgot to ask permission. The deal is that the policy itself is very clear. There's no need to modify our policy on this particular issue. This is not something new in our policy. This has been a standing element in our policy for a very long time. And we just have a situation where we have court personnel that went to these various conferences, and they simply didn't complete the circle.
Hearing no motion, then by the lack thereof, I would assume that means we're not going to approve the exceptions. And I guess one other statement, just with everything that's going on in our budget and what we're looking at, I would really hope that we might discourage or encourage folks not to, if they're in a 4-county area, I would hope that they would go ahead, and I understand it may be a little inconvenient, but would try not to stay overnight if it's in the Dallas, Tarrant, Denton, Collin County area. Certainly, if they feel like they have to, I would hope that they would ask for an exception to the policy prior to doing that.
Your Honor, are we ready to move on?
Yes.
We can go to item number 7. We're requesting that the court approve a contract for the Fortenberry for Judge campaign for a photography session to be used. They want to use a courtroom in our historic courthouse for promotional purposes. They have agreed to the $1,000 a day filming. They've also submitted their insurance information. We have that. There is one correction on this, and that's just on the fiscal impact. On the general fund, it should be, the last 4 digits should be 2009 rather than 2008. Staff is recommending approval.
Has this been run by the DA's office?
Yes, it has.
Is there obviously we must have a standard fee we charge?
When we had Walker Texas Ranger first shoot at the historic courthouse a long time ago, this court set a fee of $1,000 if it was a full-day shoot, and we have used that standard in different requests as we move forward. If it's a nonprofit, that's one issue, but if it's a promotional, we do charge a fee. They have to have a certain level of insurance. They also have to make sure that they clean the property up and leave it in the same condition that they found it in.
This is on a Saturday,
Yes.
so we'll have somebody there to let them in, let them out.
Yes, we will.
This is for a political campaign?
That's correct.
Have we ever
That falls a little bit outside of just promotional.
Well, Commissioner, I don't know if we've ever done this for a political issue.
I don't know that we have either,
Okay.
and I don't know that I'm willing to start.
Well, this was a request, and if you all choose not to do this, then that's fine too. But we have to bring these requests to the court for any type of action of this nature.
Okay. Has there ever been any elected official who has used a photograph taken in the courthouse?
Absolutely.
Yes, yes.
Then how do you deny somebody seeking an office to not have the same right?
This falls under the maxim that it's far easier to get forgiveness than permission.
But ethically or legally, there's no problems.
It has to be approved by the Commissioners Court. That's what Marvin was saying, if we do this.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a second to approve. Any further discussion? I guess where if they just go in there and take a shot, then they go in there and take a shot.
Well, they're going to take shots, but I don't think it's hard liquor. I think it's...
And they're not going to use guns, right?
I think they're going to be, I think they're insinuating they're going to be there a while.
But and I think that's the thing, is they're actually, it's formally, they're setting things up and they're doing stuff like that.
It's a 9 to 2 on a Saturday in a vacant courtroom. They're going to bring a bunch of people in, and we historically...
And show this person in a judicial setting acting like a judge.
I have no idea what the shot is going to be, Commissioner.
Yeah, well, I think it's pretty easy to surmise.
Any other discussion? Please vote. Motion passes 3-2.
Finally, members of court, on item number 8, we are requesting that the Commissioners Court approve a contract between Tarrant County and Angela Walker, who's a social work intern, to work in our supportive housing program.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Manius. Ms. Snyder?
You can see the risk management side of our office has been busy this week. This week we have 5 claims that we're seeking your approval on. The first 4 are for property damage. The last one is the resolution of a claim that includes a small bit of medical. We are recommending their approval.
So
All
moved.
5.
All 5.
Move approval.
Second?
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion?
Do we need to have some new safety classes or defensive driving or something?
Well, trust me, there's 4 people that will probably be attending defensive driving.
Any other question? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Wright.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have a subrogation check that we're requesting the acceptance by the court in the amount of $6,422.88 for representing full recovery of our subrogation claim.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Phillips.
Good morning.
Good morning.
It is requested that Commissioners Court approve a professional architectural and engineering services contract with Arthur Ryman Architects related to the Tarrant County 1895 Courthouse Clock Tower Historically Sensitive Rehabilitation Project.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
It is requested that Commissioners Court approve a contract with Air Balance Company for HVAC testing, adjusting, balancing, and leadership in energy and environmental design work related to the Medical Examiner's Office Expansion Project included in the 2006 Capital Improvement Program.
Move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Commissioners Court asked staff to go back and look at some things regarding the RFP for parking management for the Calhoun Garage and Plaza Lot. We have completed our study, and I've got some results for you. Regarding the health insurance, both firms, Central Parking and Standard Parking, both provide group health insurance, and they provide the lion's share of the cost for that health insurance to those employees. They also provide a life insurance policy, a minimum life insurance policy, and they contribute to a 401k retirement program. One of them is 3% of their salary up to, and the other one's 4%. So basically, they're the same in that respect. With regard to the operating expenses, we went back and added in to Central Parking's operating expense spreadsheet the cost of that health insurance, like the court asked us to do. It was $650 a month, should the employee decide to take it. However, the reason that Central did not put that in the first place in their in the RFP is because, to their knowledge, none of the employees who have worked at the Plaza Lot have ever opted to take the Central Parking group health insurance. So that's why they never, and they didn't expect that to happen. However, they would charge us if, in fact, that employee did take the
Excuse me, I don't quite understand what you're saying here. You said that they provide health insurance and they pay the majority of the cost, yet there's this $650 fee? What's that about?
If a employee decides, just similar to Tarrant County, if the employee decides to take the business's insurance, the Central Parking would pick up $650 of the premium to the health administrator's cost of the health insurance for the employee, and the employee would pick up about $100. Just like I do, Tarrant County is great in picking up most of the majority of the cost of my health insurance, and I pick up some as well. It's the same thing there. And I think both companies do the same service.
So it would be, their costs would be increased by $650 a month if this individual chose to participate and not opt out of their program as he has done in the past.
Yes, Judge.
Now, were they charged against the county?
If they decide to take it, if the employee takes the health insurance, yes, it would be charged against the county. What's happening today, and has happened in the past, at Central Parking down at the Plaza Lot, that employee or employees in the past have decided not to take the company insurance, and so Tarrant County was not charged for any premium. And it's a little different at the Calhoun Garage, where two of those three employees, I believe, do take the health insurance provided by Standard, and we are charged for that, for the Standards piece of it. However, if somebody came along at Plaza when Central was there and took it, we would probably be picking up that particular cost.
But in both of these instances, while these are estimated expenses, we are required to reimburse them their actual expenses with, at least at the current time, no ceiling upon what those expenses would be.
That's correct. That's correct, Judge. We had, as part, and the reason we wrote the court communication request in the manner it's written, it talks about subject to successful contract negotiations. There's 2 or 3 clauses we're going to see about adding into the parking management contract. One of them is to do an expense stop, and we'll decide what that is, or a cap, and also any kind of CPI increase over the multiple subsequent years. So that's one thing we would probably add before we brought it back to court.
Well, when this came on the agenda 2 or 3 weeks ago, it was under purchasing. Now it's under facility management. And the only thing I see changed in the wording is that on the original, it was with 2 12-month options. This one doesn't show 2 12-month options.
In the RFP, it discusses about the options. We specifically put in here, Commissioner, regarding, we're asking the Commissioner's Court to approve the RFP to Central Parking Systems subject to negotiations with Central Parking Systems because they have not seen some things that we want to add to the contract that weren't in the contract previously. Things like the auditor requested we do regarding the expense stops and things of that nature. So, but there is some options in there, and we would bring back that to the court if we come up with some successful negotiations.
Now, we do have an audience participation on this particular item. We can bring that person up at this point in time to...
I think we should.
I'd like to ask one more question.
Okay.
Before you bring that person.
And Gary also, I believe, Commissioner Fickens also has one.
Can we do these additions that you're talking about in negotiations when they weren't spelled out in the RFP originally?
Yes, Commissioner. The contract itself was not part of the RFP. The actual 3 or 4 page contract discussion was not part of it.
Dave, these two providers, when you look at your rating system, appear to be fairly close compared to the others. Why don't we just ask each of them to, or the group again, tell us how much they'll guarantee to pay the county instead of going through all this other, where we really don't know exactly what we're going to get. Just put it out, how much will you guarantee to pay the county? It appears that other things such as the insurances and stability and experience appear to be very close. 1 point difference here and there.
I agree with Gary. Can't we bring in these two guys, the two top guys, and ask them for best and final?
I think regarding to guaranteed revenue or operating income.
I'm on a guaranteed revenue. What will they write a check for to operate our garage per year?
We certainly can do that, and let me tell you this first. They would probably use historical data as some kind of input to that determination. There's going to be some somewhat dynamic changes with regard to the plaza lot over the next year, where we're going to be adding into the county clerk's vital records and the credit union, which I think ought to be substantial revenue generators. And so that I expect the revenue to go up over there, is what I'm basically. And I don't know how much. And I don't know if that'd be still on the table over here somewhere to our loss, because I don't know if they know how much either. But things do change. We're going to be changing.
If we had a guaranteed amount based on, these people are in this business.
Right now, they have no incentive to control expenses nor enhance revenue, because we reimburse them. Now, I understand you're going to talk about this with them in their negotiations, but in effect right now, we pay them whatever their expenses are, and there's no incentive for them to go out there and try to get someone else to park in this lot to raise the revenue, and we don't know for sure how tight of controls they have over all the cash revenue that's coming in as a result of that.
I do think there are several things from where we came from the last time the court discussed this particular issue, and the auditor's office did a quick review of operations. There's going to be a need to add some additional equipment into the plaza a lot. That is not something that the parking companies do. That's something that the county has to do. So we're going to tighten up our controls in that area. That's going to be an expenditure, though, that we're going to make regardless of who operates the parking. I do think, though, that if we get to a point where that the court wants to base their decision on how much revenue that these companies would actually pay the county, I think that we're going to need to go back. This RFP is not structured for that type of request, and we're probably going to have to go back and reissue the RFP.
Then let's do that.
And then if we do, it's not going to be limited to these two companies.
I understand.
It'll be open to each and every one.
What's this equipment that we're adding going to do for the county?
At the Plaza lot and Radio Shack left, my understanding is the equipment that was used to control the cash receipts for parking for that lot belonged to Radio Shack. We did not then purchase equipment for that lot that's equivalent to the equipment that we have at the Calhoun Street garage. it is not possible to have an effective system of internal controls surrounding several $100,000 of cash when it's all a manual system. And that's what you have at the plaza lot, regardless of who operates that system. You need a cash register that's tied into the ticket dispenser that calculates the fee and also controls how often the arm can go up with a no sale, just like a cash register in a grocery store. You don't hit no sale and open the drawer without someone being aware of that. The controls at the two facilities are different, but it's primarily a result of the fact that there is no automated equipment that the county has provided at the plaza lot.
Right now on Weatherford Street, that parking lot is chained, except for in the morning when you have somebody out there flagging cars in. And when they flag them in, they manually hand them a ticket. So there's really no way to determine how many tickets were out and when those tickets were handed out. I think what they're talking about would be removing the chain and putting a ticket dispenser.
Well, it's more than that. It's actually installing a cash register on the other side, though, that also calculates the fee and controls if the arm is raised without the fee being paid.
Right.
So the in and out that primarily occurs on the side of the lot that you don't see, the Second Street, is that the street? We still need a cash register there and a ticket dispenser there that also is all automated and tied together. That's what we have in the Calhoun Street garage. That's what we need in that lot. If we were to go to this revenue approach, I'm sure the vendor that acquired that lot would install those controls because there's just not any way to adequately safeguard cash in the manual environment that we have. It's not a reflection on the vendor, it's a reflection on the fact that the equipment is just not in place.
I would like to go ahead and give our audience person an opportunity to come up. Jay, I believe it's Jay, is it Layden?
Yes, that's correct. David.
Please come forward and please, for the purposes of the record, state your name and address and who you're with and your comments.
Thank you, Judge and Commissioners. Appreciate you hearing me today. It's Jay Layden. Address is 3303 Banbury. I'm actually in Houston right now. I am with Standard Parking, and we have operated the Calhoun Garage since it was opened in 2005 until present. And in the recent RFP, we were only, like you said, 3 points, behind based on budget and a little difference in the fee. And I just wanted to point out our approach was more of providing, good customer service, first-class operation, and our ideas were to grow the revenue, and have the right balance of expenses. For instance, we have a facility manager at the Calhoun Garage that we had budgeted for, although the county doesn't pay, but a portion of their salary. And this facility manager is there to provide customer service. They provide additional accounting controls, provide separation of duties, which is very important from an auditing standpoint. They also open that second booth, when the line backs up, to help unload the garage. The other thing, in our original proposal, we did have over $9,000 a year budgeted, for group health insurance for our employees. And as mentioned before, the other recommended company had zero. And the other thing I wanted to point out is we had, $9,300 of repair and maintenance for that garage, which is based on what we have spent, which is $6,000 more, than what the recommended company had. So that's another $6,000 that we put, directly into cleaning that garage. And on the plaza lot, the cost difference was only like $2,700, and that was more of, the fact that we had more of a dedicated, manager, plus we had, group health insurance anticipated. So when you really load level, the two bids, we're, really, pretty even, but, we believe that having the manager there is very important from a customer service and accounting standpoint. And we feel that that adds a lot of value. Now, as far as value, we did put in a marketing plan. We recommended, just raising each increment rate by $1 and taking actual tickets. That will make the county $74,000 a year more, in revenue, just by, making that small move, and you're still below market. The other thing we recommended is an afternoon rate, to charge a $4 discount rate. We think that would grow revenue by another $5,000. The other thing we recommended is taking credit cards. We think that'll grow revenue by at least another $5,000. The other thing we want to point out, is we actually have an internal audit department, which comes and audits that facility, and that's at no additional charge to the county. They do a 160-point inspection of the facility, financial and operational, and that is covered within our fee, which is a great value add to the county. And so for this reason, we really, wanted, to recommend that the court, reconsider, the recommendation. But I would like to take a minute to, address, Commissioner Fick's recommendation. As an alternative, really what we might think about is, to guarantee our expenses, to operate each facility, and then have some kind of incentive to grow the revenue. Like Mr. Phillips said, if we guarantee, a fixed rent and say on the plaza lot, we know revenue is going to, increase, then the county might be leaving some, money on the table. So doing a guarantee on expenses, could be, an option as well, just as a thought. So, but anyway, I do appreciate you hearing our point, and do request that you reconsider. Right.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you.
Secondly, we're adding in the insurance, as the court asked us to do, to make it apples to apples. The central parking is $55,000 lower than standard on an annual basis for both projects.
And again, I guess one of the issues he just brought up was they manage are they managing the Calhoun right now? They spent $6,000 more in maintenance. If I'd been estimating and put a zero on there for maintenance, but then it ended up spending $12,000, I'm going to get reimbursed $12,000, right?
That's correct.
As the contract stands right now.
That's correct. We asked them to do maintenance on the cash register, anything to do with the cash. We perform the maintenance on the little ticket dispensers and things of that nature, but they do handle and they pay for the tickets, as at both projects. But if it touches the cash, we let them do it. Now, the next thing is regarding the equipment. To bring a cash register and an additional ticket dispenser on the Weatherford side, and to wire it in and saw cut the concrete and all that to install it, somewhere between $30,000 and $40,000. We also, at that time, will go ahead and upgrade our existing ticket dispenser so the ticket will automatically, the ticket can be inputted into the cash register and automatically read it of the entry date. Because right now they have to input it over at the Calhoun garage. The parking attendant has to take the ticket that the person gives them, inputs the time they came in, and does the calculation because it hasn't. This new system, the actual ticket will be able to do both. They'll be able to stick the ticket into the cash register, just like sticking a credit card into a gas pump, and it automatically reads it. And that will probably take $30,000 to $40,000. Also, we would need to upgrade the Calhoun 3 ticket dispensers as they come in on Calhoun Street, and that's about $24,000. So to get it up to that level. And that brings me to this. Both firms recommended that we look at walk-up pay kiosks. And I don't know if you've seen these in other facilities, but you come in, you get a ticket when you come into the parking facility, and you go do your business, and you walk over here to this kiosk, and there's one down the street at a surface lot, and you come in and you stick your credit card in or debit card or cash, and it stamps your ticket. You take your ticket out, you drive out at this gate operator, stick the ticket in the gate operator, and it automatically, hopefully, goes up. And you don't have...
Dave, I could talk to you for an hour on why we don't want to use that system.
Okay.
I have used it extensively, and inevitably what happens is people don't pay because they don't remember they're supposed to pay the ticket machine. They go get their car, they pull up to the gate and they can't get out. So they park, they get out of the car, they leave the car, they walk 25 feet over here and go through this machine, and they're backing up 10 cars behind them, and then somebody in the middle who can't get out, they got the same problem. Okay, it is the biggest. I do it at a hospital over in Dallas, and they have to have a man standing at that machine from 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning until about 5:30 afternoon to help people figure it out. And he's there every time I come.
So
It's the most ridiculous thing I've ever seen.
I think we can register you as a no.
I'm a no. I'll give you a better idea. Why don't you let our parking vendors pay for all of our equipment, give them a long-term lease to amortize the cost, and how much will they pay us a year? And we don't have to put out any capital money. Wouldn't that be?
We would need to probably rebid that.
I would think so. But don't be talking about those machines. Those things are terrible.
We would give them instructions to put the certain ticket dispensers out and the cash register and get them both apples to apples and make that part of our RFP. But the current RFP does not address that whatsoever.
I think the philosophy of the RFP needs to be different and focus on enhanced revenue and a cap on expenses, or a guarantee of revenue, and we don't care what the expenses are.
Well, we have to have some sort of minimum standard there.
Well, if we're getting our money, then
I don't have, I mean, from my perspective, I think either one of those works as far as, okay, after a certain dollar amount, we share the, I mean, my preference would be, as Commissioner Fickus has just outlined, is to say, you tell us what you'll pay us a month to operate the lot. Now, the one thing, and here's where we start, but we do realize that as a court, we're going to have to we're going to have to set a ceiling on the rates that they can charge, and then we're going to have to determine whether we're going to continue to give free parking to the people who are going to be coming up to the tax, down there for coming in to pay their taxes, or to deal with the tax assessor collector, or for early voting, or for any number of things that we currently validate and allow them to not have to pay. And we're going to have to either spell that out, or we're going to have to ask for some sort of an allowance that says that we'll be granted so many free space, so much free time on that. So it's not as easy as it's just let's pay it, unless we're willing to say nobody gets to park free, everybody has to pay, and
if they make a guarantee, we're going to have to make a guarantee. That's what it amounts to.
Sure.
Not to exceed.
I haven't heard the legal eagles over here say anything, so I guess y'all are agreeing that everything, we're either going to rebid or we're going to accept what we've got coming forward right now.
I think if you want to get too far beyond what David has suggested, certainly any kind of a max, any kind of a hard fix on the rates charged, there's probably reason to rebid. But this
when does the contract end? Current contracts?
I think it ended, I don't have it in front of me, I think it was last month.
So obviously we can go ahead, and if we rebid, and hopefully the two
This new contract was supposed to start October 1. So the two firms, two companies are in place yet, and so you have an October 1. We are looking for an October 1 start on this issue.
Which company has which parking lot now?
Standard does
the Calhoun Garage, and Central does the Plaza parking lot.
And they roughly have the same number of parking spaces, David, That's correct.
And to give you, if everything was equal, from what I understand, we're collecting about 350 on the Plaza and about 500 on the Calhoun, which may give you some indication as to how much either we're giving away or how less much revenue we're making on the 150, if everything else is supposed to be equal, then there's $150,000 difference, and that's either made up as a result of what we're giving away or what the other one's not making.
Yes, Judge, just the number of tickets, there's about 2,000 more tickets that are dispensed generally over per month over to Calhoun. I think that's more of the in and out because of the folks going to the family law and the competition. Regarding the competition, the Plaza Lot has competition regarding the free parking at LaGrave and other surface lots around there, so it's a little different. We do give free parking or validate parking for about 500 or so folks per month for that Plaza Lot, and that is for visitors to the AgriLife. For most of those are like master gardeners and volunteers and folks like that. It's training for folks who come in from out of downtown. They park over there, and we validate their parking when the Historical Commission has a meeting and things of that nature. So that has a value generally around $4,000 a month. We also put about 150 to 160 county employees on that parking lot after 1 o'clock. That's the second shift for the Sheriff's Department, and that pretty much takes 2/3 of that lot up.
You've still got you've got the same situation at the Calhoun garage. About half of that is employees.
Well, I didn't count the employees over here. There's about 250 in each public parking.
The first three floors in Calhoun are public, employees are after that, so we're not counting the employee piece of that.
But they go through the gate, and it's counted somewhere.
Whenever they exit, then they use their card to exit.
And then the sheriff's, the ones that park over there after 1 in the afternoon.
$15 a month.
Okay.
It got our waiting list for the downtown parking down dramatically. It got it down to about 150.
$15 a month, or is it 25?
It's 15 uncovered.
Okay.
And they jumped on it. Okay, we will go back and look at...
What is the direction of the court?
We don't, what
I move that we reject all bids and rebid with revised specifications.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. The motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
What did you extract from Mr. Beecham in order for him to get that on your agenda?
Not enough. Not enough. I was probably going to be up here anyway.
But he's sitting back there grinning.
He's back there. He's been laughing. He's been rolling in the aisle back there ever since you... You're not up yet. You just coming up here to take a little grief?
Thank you.
Good morning. It made only sense to purchasing facilities and the auditor's department sat on the evaluation committee, and David was going to ask for requests for new equipment, so it was obvious his need to do that.
We appreciate
Plus, you did a
that
good
sound
job.
logic there.
Everybody gets their turn in the circle.
Yes. Speaking of which, Ms. Glenn.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I have two items for the court this morning. The first item, we're asking the court to receive and file the personnel agenda.
So moved.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to receive and file the personnel agenda. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item, we're asking the court to approve an out-of-class pay extension for juvenile services. We've brought two requests, previous requests, to the court. This is the third request. If you recall, this is the situation where the juvenile probation officer has assumed the duties of the caseworker manager who's assigned to the JCMS project. We're anticipating that we'll come back to you for one more extension before all of the work is completed. The fiscal impact of this request is approximately $2,400.
Move for approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Mr. Smith?
Thank you, Your Honor, Commissioners. We're seeking approval of a recommendation by IT staff and the SAP Executive Committee to cancel the SAP Duet project for two compelling reasons. The first being SAP and Microsoft's partnership has not matured as we expected. But most importantly, we'll be able to utilize our current SAP portal to provide much of the same functionality desired through ESS. This action will result in a reduction of approximately $300,000 from IT's current year budget.
Move approval.
Second.
Have a motion and a second. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Ms. Brewer.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Public Health has 2 items for your approval today. The first is interim financing for fiscal year 2010. These are grants from Minority AIDS Initiative, Part A, Ryan White, Part D, Ryan White 4, Part D, Preparedness Lab, Preparedness Base, and Preparedness Community Readiness Initiative. And we have received all of our previous interim fundings.
Lou, who's getting these Minority AIDS Initiative Part A Ryan White funds?
I can't tell you specifically, but I'll be glad to find out for you and let you know.
We've had a significant problem in this community keeping a minority AIDS services organization in existence, yet we keep getting these dollars and somebody's getting them. I don't understand how that works.
I'll be glad to clarify that for you. I don't have that information today.
So you want to hold it?
What is the impact of not doing this today?
Well, since we don't have court next week, there may be an interruption in funding.
One of the things we do, and I can't tell you who's receiving the funds either, but when we have ongoing services that are being provided and they've applied for a new grant, but the grant award is not going to occur in time, we apply for the interim funding as the stopgap so that the services continue to be provided until the actual grant award is received. So this is a fairly common practice that...
Who actually awards the grants? Is it us that awards the grants, or it's somebody else that's awarding the grants?
Usually we're waiting on funding from either the state or feds or wherever the money is coming from.
But it goes to our administrative agency, and then there's a community group that looks at the applications.
So the community group is actually selecting...
Appointed by you.
Well, I thought I remembered this, and I thought I remembered actually having appointed somebody on that process.
But the community group sets the community priorities and decides what programs and who.
That's on the Ryan White grants. There are 3 other, there are not 3 other grants here that are not Ryan White grants also. Okay.
This is not the first time that I have surfaced a concern over this issue. We've had meetings about it on more than one occasion, and we don't seem to be able to make any progress in this area.
In terms of progress, I think we have been looking very, very hard for other groups. In terms of being able to answer your question and to sort out what's up here for interim approval today, $25,000 is for the minority AIDS funding, and the rest is Ryan White Part 4 and preparedness funding. But I'll be glad to find out what the $25,000 will go for.
You know, I think that, maybe what we need to do is bring some of the folks from the advisory group here and just let them make some sort of a brief presentation. And I don't know that we hold up the funding of the grant at this point. And again, what it is, the grant has been funded. We've got somebody doing work. The money has not been if I'm understanding this right, the money has not been
It's a money flow issue right now.
That's right.
This is basically a bridge loan.
Bridging the loan. And so I don't think it's changing the vendors at this point in time or selecting new ones.
No.
So maybe what needs to happen is we need to approve the extension or the bridge, and then we need to have someone from the system or from whoever's selecting the
We'll be glad to.
providers to come and sit down and talk with the court about the process that they're going through and to address concerns
glad
that
to do
Commissioner
that.
Brooks may have.
Let me be clear. Lou has just made it even worse. Only $25,000 of this money is going to the Minority AIDS Initiative. Yet, the highest demographic by far of new AIDS cases is in minority communities. So how can our AIDS, Community AIDS Council, or whatever it's called, in setting the priorities for funding in this community, put so low a priority on where the highest demographic of new cases is? It boggles my mind.
And what we need to do,
Having said that, I move approval of interim financing for these programs. But Lou, I want some answers.
We'll be glad to bring you more information back. And at the risk of making it even worse, I was just trying to differentiate the different pots of money that are in this request for interim financing. There are other pots of money in here.
Let me second the motion to make this discussion legal.
We have a motion and a second.
Is none of the other money that's listed under the minority AIDS going to minority AIDS victims?
I'm not sure I understand
Well,
your
there's
question.
25, 46, 175, and 61A. What is that money doing? Who's that helping?
Are you looking at all of the
Okay,
funding?
Lou, talk about preparedness lab, preparedness base.
Yeah, these are all separate programs. So the lab, we get separate.
Relate to minority.
We get separate preparedness funding for the lab. And then we get what we call preparedness-based funding. This is the original public health preparedness-based funding. That's the $175,000.
Okay.
And then we get CRI, or city readiness funding, and that's the 61.8. Those three are all for public health preparedness. They have nothing to do with minority.
We have 3 or 4 items that needed interim funding, and she lumped them all together in one.
Somewhere into the not too distant future, realizing that budget is going to be taking a lot of our time, but maybe in a couple of weeks, let's have someone come in from that committee and let's talk a little bit about this particular area and see where we go from there.
Your Honor, that's a good idea to do because, quite frankly, that entity, the planning group, they're the ones who make the decisions on this. We administer the program. You know, so.
And I do appoint, I guess, that group, and so we'll talk about that and see where we go from there. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our second item is approval of a contract with the Texas Department of State Health Services to purchase antiviral medications at the subsidized federal rate.
Move approval.
Second. We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. I'm assuming that means I'm going to have a lot of, anytime Ryan White is mentioned, it usually results in a desk full of signatures.
Oh, yes.
Okay, Mr. Beecham, it's your shot. It ought to be pretty smooth now that you...
Thank goodness we only have 2 items for your consideration this morning.
Transferred all the problem areas to facilities. Now we move on.
I'm sure my parking just went up. We have 2 items for your consideration this morning. Our first item is a bid award recommendation for RFP number 2009-103. It's an annual contract for Cisco call center monitoring and maintenance services. Recommendation will be toward the NEC United Solutions.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Our last item is also a bid award recommendation for bid number 2009-112. It's an annual contract for the purchase and installation of mechanic truck cranes and sign job truck bodies. Recommendation is to award on a per unit price basis, selecting the primary and secondary vendors that meet our specifications.
Move approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Fickus, I believe you have a interlocal agreement.
Yes, the city of Haslett. This is to do work on Westport.
So I'm assuming that's a motion?
That is, but I'm just...
I'll second.
Okay.
Well, we have a motion and a second to approve items 7M, 1A, and B. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Are there any appointments? There being none, then we will move to the claims, including the addendum.
Move for approval of the claims, including the addendum.
Second.
We have a motion and a second to approve the claims, including the addendum. Any discussion? Please vote. Motion passes unanimously. Briefing items, Mr. Manius.
Thank you, Your Honor. We have several items for the court this morning. The first is the monthly update from the Tarrant County Hospital District. Mr. Early is here to address the court at this time.
They briefed me in the newspaper this morning.
There you go. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Earl.
Thank you, Commissioner, Judge. Thank you, the other commissioners as well. I want to personally thank David Phillips for his willingness to come to the hospital district and lay out some of my difficult issues. He's agreed to do that, and I'm very thankful for that. I've had a few issues that have been cumbersome.
Parking garage over there?
We do, and I need to sit down with Commissioner Fickus and talk about which kind of arms we're going to have that go up and go down. I know that he is casual about his opinions, so I think it will be helpful.
I wouldn't be buying one of them machines if I were you.
I'm not, and I, in fact, canceled the check by text message on our sit here. Don't do that. Note to self from Commissioner Fickus. But I'm appreciative to be here, as I always am each month, and I wanted to tell you as a follow-up to Mr. Spangler's article this morning on bringing in the Studa Group. It is such a large organization at JPS, and we are receiving more letters of compliment. We are doing things in a manner that I appreciate. We are putting a patient first, but we need to have coordination in how we do that with an organization of that size. The Studa Group was the group we brought in for our board retreat, and I thought they did an excellent job. They also have a lot of history in hospitals. They don't do consulting work in other areas. They only consult and provide expertise in how to move an organization in a positive way for hospitals. And they've got a proven record of seeing a lot of hospitals that look and act just like JPS, and they've turned them around, and I think getting their help and their service will do a great justice to us. The other thing is I received a phone call from Mr. Manius, which was a well-put phone call that says what is going on in Washington and how it would affect JPS. I also received and had discussions with Commissioner Brooks about that very issue. I don't know. We watch it daily. You've got a House issue, you've got a Senate issue. I predict that this will be written in a conference committee at some point. I don't think it will reach its August deadline, but I don't know. There's a sentimental and emotional issue in Washington right now, and it concerns Senator Kennedy and his health. I know there's a lot of folks that want to see a health care reform measure passed that the senator can sign and celebrate, and there's an expediency to that, and you have political campaign issues, and there's an expediency to that. I have asked our congressional delegation if they would look wisely at them and not get into the expeditious nature of it, but yet the need for not only reform, but something we're going to live with in healthcare for the rest of our lives. I will say one editorial comment, and that is just receiving a health card that says you have health insurance does not mean health access and health care. And safety net hospitals, Parkland and us, certainly in the Metroplex and the other safety net hospitals throughout the nation, play a critical role, because I think it is a myth to think everybody's going to have a health insurance, whip a card out of their pocket and say, I'm here. It's not going to work that way. And you still have the issue of an undocumented population, which isn't being discussed in Washington or in headlines as to what you do.
I'll remind you of our 6,200 births last year, 72% of them were, roughly 72% were to an undocumented population. We serve that population, whether one gets into the political fray or not. And I don't mean to point position to a political issue. It's not. It's a healthcare issue. When people come into our emergency room, whether they're from South Fort Worth or Timbuktu, we take care of those people. And there is a cost to taking care of those people, and we do it daily. So I have been on a panel with Congressman Barton. I, along with 9 other CEOs, discussed the issue with Congressman Burgess yesterday, and I'm happy to give insight in any way that I can. But to know what the answer is, I don't know. They don't know in Washington right now. So we monitor it daily, and we'll see what happens, and we'll see what the impact is. And I'll give you all the briefings that I possibly can on what we see as the ramifications to your public hospital.
You talking to anybody on the majority side of the aisle?
Yes, we constantly do. We have a couple of. We've been very fortunate to have associations that we work through, and we have the fortune of having now Dr. Floyd on board, who's a delegate to some of the associations, such as the American Medical Association, who's had direct contact with folks. But I understand majority and minority politics, and it's very important that we communicate with across the board, and we have. And some of that's helpful to me because there's so many of the congressional delegation that are my former colleagues that I have a relationship with that I can call them around the state and chat with them about the impact to a public hospital in Tarrant County. But the point well taken. Also, we are in the midst of the throes of the budget. I think I have a level of popularity right now because everybody thinks they're going to get what they want, and my popularity will fade significantly around September 15th when the realization is that I'm not as kind as people want me to be. And so all the budget requests are coming in as we try to decipher all that. There's 3 critical things. First of all, we will have a budget retreat on August 1st. With certainly any of you, your staffs wish to attend. We'll be providing briefings. We will meet directly with Mr. Manias on some of the funds that are needed from a county level, whether it's correctional health or MHMR or public health. We'll have that meeting with him and discuss that. Also, we're working on an overall facility plan for JPS and a capital plan. Those are things that we will obviously share with y'all as we get to that time point. We are in...
Where's that budget retreat going to be?
At the hospital.
Will be at the hospital?
We wouldn't want to retreat at the Omni or anything, so we'll have it right there.
I think they have a little problem with water over there right now. But
they do, and we're not going there because of that very reason. We also are conducting interviews, which I'm excited about. We're in the midst this week and next week of conducting interviews with our candidates for Permanent Chief Financial Officer and Chief Nurse Officer, and we also are now receiving a list of names for our Vice President of Human Resources. So I'm excited by that process. Those are national searches, and so far the names that I've seen, at least on paper, we have some real strong, viable candidates for all of our positions. So I feel very positive about that. So I wish to thank you all and make myself available at any point by phone, or you want me in your office or you want me in your district. I'll be happy to do that, and as usual, appreciate you all very much.
Thank you, Rob.
You're welcome.
Any questions? Thanks again.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Early. Members of the Court, on item B, this is an update on the Tower 55 project. I believe Ms. Lamb is going to lay this project out initially. We do have a slide presentation on this.
Thank you. Today we have representatives from the North Central Texas Council of Governments here to provide the Court an update on the status of the Tower 55 project. I'm sure that you know Tower 55 is located below the I-30 and I-35W interchange. It's one of the busiest at-grade railroad intersections in the nation. We have BNSF, Union Pacific, the Fort Worth and Western Railroad, Amtrak, and the Trinity Rail Express all have operations that converge at this intersection. They are conducting a public hearing on August the 3rd at the Intermodal Center downtown Fort Worth to discuss this project. And before that, they asked that they could come before court and brief you. Today, the briefing will be conducted by Tom Shelton. He's a senior project manager for the Streamline Project Delivery, and he's in charge of this project. We also have Randall High with COG staff and Cindy Gillihan with the City of Fort Worth here. And if you'd like to come forward, Tom, I do have some handouts that Tom's provided for the court.
This will advance it forward. Great. Good morning, Your Honor and Commissioners. In light of your heavy agenda, I'll keep this very brief and allow you to ask some questions if you like at the end. As she indicated, we have our next round of public meetings on August the 3rd, which will actually be our 5th round of public meetings since the Council of Governments took the leadership of this project about 3 years ago. And we are going through some effort to brief all of our individual stakeholders over the next few weeks preceding that meeting. The Tower 55 project does have a long history, and just as a friendly reminder, Tower 55, as it sits near downtown Fort Worth in the southeast quadrant, remains today as the most heavily congested railroad intersection in the entire country. It is a nexus, if you will, in the north-south direction. Primarily BNSF trains run north and south, and east and west run primarily Union Pacific Rail trains. And both of those tracks are very important to each of those railroads. Also, as a friendly reminder, when the interchange between I-30 and I-35 was reconstructed years ago, provisions were made in that interchange for a future improvement at Tower 55 in the north-south direction, so that the span and the bridges were constructed in that fashion. You'll just see there a listing of some of the events over the last 3 years, and as I said, this will be our 5th round of public meetings, and very appropriately, public involvement is very important to this project. What the Council of Governments is doing at the moment is crafting and conducting this study really for a primary objective of developing a single long-term improvement that has a consensus approval of all of our stakeholders as well as the community, and conducting an environmental document and getting environmental clearance, and essentially teeing this project up that contingent on funding will move rapidly into engineering and construction over the next few years. The issues at Tower 55 are immense, they're complicated, they're numerous in nature, and rather than wait for many years to consolidate and find appropriate funding to fund a full implementation of a single improvement, Council of Governments thinks it's very appropriate to sort of phase these improvements in over time, begin immediately as we can to address some of the concerns of the community, such as safety, children crossing the tracks, and ability to provide emergency response to those communities that are locked into the tracks. So you can see that we have carefully crafted what we call a progression of improvements over time. Some short-term improvements of at-grade crossings, pedestrian issues would be taken care of within the next 1 to 3 years. Midterm improvements, which is a grade separation idea, which I'll speak again in a minute, would be in the 5 to 8 year range. And then a long-term vision, which is included in our regional mobility plan, is what we refer to as the regional rail bypass. Taking those trains that literally are passing through our region that currently go through the dense urban core and relocating those outside of the region in the dense urban areas so those trains can move freely through the region. Those trains that would remain in the urban area that are primarily for providing delivery of goods to local industries, those would remain. So you can see that progression of improvements is important. Addressing the at-grade solution, the BNSF and the UP are currently designing this idea and work in very close partnership with the City of Fort Worth's TPW department under Russ Wild's leadership. Several street crossing improvements and pedestrian overpass. They are hopeful to have this $70 million project funded either fully or partially through the Economic Recovery Program, primarily under the Tiger grant opportunity that currently is in a competitive grant process. And the Council of Governments is partnering with them very carefully and showing our support for that project. Real quickly, and I won't belabor this, just speak about the long-term improvement, which is a regional rail bypass. This project would be over 300 miles in length, possibly exceed over $8 billion in investment, and again addresses the through traffic issue that I mentioned. Obviously, with that type of investment and the many different agreements that would have to be executed, we see this as about a 20-term project in the future. A couple of different maps for your benefit of different ideas that COG staff has developed about what possible locations. They would be relocated into existing freight corridors that either have been abandoned or very lightly used today. The idea would be not acquiring any new greenfield properties that we would want to reserve for future development. So a couple of different ideas that we continue to evaluate. Bringing your attention back then to what we call our midterm improvements that we hope to implement within the next 5 to 8 years. Many of us refer to that as a grade separation idea. Back in February of this year, when we went out to the public the last time, staff recommended a single improvement of what we call the north-south grade trench option, where you would literally take the north-south running tracks and depress those into a trench, thus creating a grade separation from the east-west traffic. And that evaluation, the result of about a 2.5-year effort of evaluation of many different ideas about how to create and reduce that conflict. Also, the region is very committed to commuter rail and passenger rail opportunities entering and exiting out of downtown Fort Worth at the ITC and the TMP building. And Tower 55, as it exists today, is an impediment to that future expansion of commuter rail through our region. As we're doing this study with the focus on the freight issues, we also want to be mindful that while we'll do that, at a minimum, we're enhancing and improving the opportunities for commuter rail. And so there's a lot of design details that we're very happy that we've been able to address to enhance that opportunity. One of the handouts that I've showed you is, and you'll have to pull out your microscope to look at it, and I apologize, is the north-south trench idea, approximately 9,000 feet in length, running from Loop 280 down to Rosedale on the south end, taking those tracks and putting them into a trench depression. It's not an unprecedented idea. I've shown you, for your benefit, some photographs of what's referred to as the Alameda Corridor project in the Long Beach, LA area. They had a very similar situation to ours, where obviously they're bringing in containers off the boat traffic from Asia, and they're needing to getting those goods movements into the heartland of this country while trying to figure out a way to bypass the Los Angeles and Long Beach areas. So you can see these photographs of a project that was constructed about 10 years ago, and there's numerous, over 30 streets that cross overhead. And so again, it just solves that conflict between the freight trains and the automobile and pedestrian traffic. So it's a similar idea that we're beginning to think about for Tower 55. Soon after February, when the staff made that draft recommendation of the north-south trench, our stakeholders, primarily the two railroads, began looking at that in more detail, and a concern that they've brought to our attention is constructability. During the expected 3-year duration of construction of the north-south trench, how would their traffic be impacted during the construction period, as you can imagine? Very similar to highways and roadways in our region that are reconstructed during traffic. And so they expressed a concern about that. And then the Union Pacific then brought to our attention another different idea that we had not yet thought about, of taking that trench idea, rotating it 90 degrees, implementing it in the east-west direction, but then moving that outside of the railroad right-of-way so that the trains could continue to operate today like they do today. The east-west trench is just north of Vickery Boulevard, just south of I-30. It impacts about 30 properties, equal number of commercial, industrial, and residential properties. We have conducted a preliminary design on this, evaluated it from its environmental impact and residential impacts, and we'll be taking this idea, as well as the north-south trench, both of these final two alternatives, to the public and the community on August 3rd to solicit their opinions on that. Again, the BNSF had similar concerns, but not to the extent that the Union Pacific did.
How many properties did the north-south trench affect? How many properties were affected by that?
Only 3 properties, and they're commercial properties that are in the southeast quadrant. And we have visited individually with those property owners, and they have not voiced any objections to acquisition of their properties in accordance with the Federal Relocation Act. City staff has evaluated the east-west trench idea. There are 6 very important cross streets that enter into downtown: Henderson, Hemp Hill, Main, Jennings, and then Tennessee on the east. And all those streets would have to be significantly reconstructed, if not potentially closed. We're still evaluating that, and so it's not a simple idea. And we believe that Hemp Hill, Main, and Jennings will have to be reconstructed. Our current concern is Henderson on the west end and Tennessee Pine on the east end. Those streets provide direct, important access, on-ramp access on I-30. And because of the location of the east-west trench, those could be significantly impacted. And we're trying to find a creative way by which those access ramps on I-30 could remain in place, possibly under some new configuration.
What happens with the historic structures that are along East Lancaster, just north of that West Vickery corridor? The K&P building, the old post office, are they going to end up in the middle of this trench?
No, those properties, those historic properties, while they're very important, they actually reside on the north side of I-30. This idea, this east-west trench, is on the south side of I-30, between I-30 and Vickery Boulevard. But Commissioner, you do bring up a very important point, that where this east-west trench resides, as I described, there are some very important historic properties that are impacted by that, not the least of which is the Henderson Street underpass today, which has been in place over 100 years. That property is protected under the federal guidelines, and that would have to be removed. There is a federal process by which you go through that, but it's not an easy undertaking. You have
Your
to prove.
grandkids can finish your job for you if that happens.
Exactly. So it's not an easy solution. What staff is trying to be is take into account and fairly evaluate an idea that one of the stakeholders brought to our attention, put it through the evaluation process and see what comes out at the end, as well as listening comment from the other public stakeholders, such as this court, and the important community and the public citizens in the area. So I'll list some other challenges that the city has brought to our attention. I'll just quickly close by, again, mentioning the public meetings. I hope some of the commissioners can attend. You'll be able to hear firsthand. The last meetings that we had in February, we had almost 200 citizens attend, so we've had really good response, and many of the residents in that area are significantly impacted by Tower 55 as it exists today, and they're very interested in a long-term solution, but a solution that is done in the right way that minimizes their impacts. So, Your Honor, I'll close with that and take any other questions.
Questions? Tom, thank you very much for all your work on this. I know it's been a long process, and working with both the railroads is definitely a challenge.
It is, but we're committed to it, as you know, Judge.
Thank you very much. Any other questions? Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Members of the court, we can go to item C. This is an update on Sendward Net Emergency Notification System. Ms. Patterson is here to address the court.
Good morning. I'm coming to give you an update on the second phase of Sendward Now as committed. On Friday, the judge and I had a news conference to release Sendward Now to the public. We committed that a year ago. We're planning to cover the 29,000 to 30,000 households in the unincorporated area, so Commissioners Brooks and Johnson, we're going to be covering as many of your people as we can. As of 8:30 this morning, we've got 130 people signed up for it, which is really good for an over-the-weekend type thing. The subscriptions, as we like to mention, are free to the citizens. We're covering that service through the Homeland Security grants. They can apply for 3 different ones, one dealing with severe weather, especially on the west side. We thought that was really important. Second one would be temperature extremes. That's really important to the senior citizen and disabled community for the extreme highs and the extreme lows. And then civil alerts, dealing with amber alerts and silver alerts, so the very young and the very elderly. We have 5 different modes of transmission that someone can select to receive these alerts in. They are by phone, either voice or text, email, pager system, or a BlackBerry pen. What we'd really like to do is talk about the contact points. The contact points are based on household. So we have up to 30,000 households that we're covering. Each household can have up to 10 different ways to receive information via the alerts. And finally, I'd like to kind of touch on what Commissioner Johnson asked earlier. We can address the evacuations for wildfires and for any severe weather events. We can do that by geographic location. So if we were to have a wildfire on that west end of the county or northwest end of the county, we could select an area with a computer and touch on those people that need to be evacuated. We can get up to 30,000 messages out in a minute. Any questions?
You know, a couple of comments that I guess I would just add to this is I think that this is a 3-phase type of a project. Last year we put all county employees on. This year it is, right now, beginning in August, it's for folks who do have an email account. So just because you may not have an email sitting at your home or have a home email, you can still subscribe through your work email address from that perspective, or any place where you have an email address. And then we're hopeful that before the storm seasons are upon us again, that you'll be able to enroll via telephone or whatever. That should be probably in 6 to 9 months. Again, it's one of those things where I think we could put on there other information like a burn ban or something along that type of lines, and I think that would be helpful. I had not thought about that until we talked about it, but I do think that would be helpful. It's only for folks in the unincorporated area, although in certain zip codes that cross over and allow for both, or include both incorporated areas and unincorporated areas, those folks may be able to enroll. Eventually the system is supposed to look, and it's all geared toward your home address, and they will look toward whether or not that home address is in the unincorporated area or not. And so someone might sign up who actually was in an incorporated city, and I guess they would just then be moved aside, or they would be de-enrolled, or whatever you would.
Well, I think the approach that we're going to take is to try to suggest a way of communication between the city that they're actually residing in and themselves. Many of our cities have similar services, and in the RFP, when we negotiated the contract, we negotiated the cooperative buying, so we can encourage some of those cities to try to come on board as well.
And each household can sign up to 10 different
Correct.
Notification numbers. So it could be, for example, in my house, my wife would have her cell phone, probably her work number. We'd have the home number. We might have emails for here, for work, or for home, and for her office. And then if we had, and then text messages also to our cell phones. So all of that could be put on there, and then you would be notified.
If you're in an incorporated city, you would?
No, if you're in an incorporated city, you will probably not. Now, all county employees have been signed up. So county employees are going to get it regardless of whether they live in an incorporated city or not. But right now, we have 29,000, the ability to enroll 29,000 households. And there's supposed to be approximately 30,000 households in the unincorporated area.
Yeah.
But if you live in the unincorporated area, that it's triggered by your residential address.
Correct.
The notifications could be to your work telephone, which may be located inside a municipality.
Right.
But it's all driven off of your residential address.
Your zip code currently.
When we enroll the county employees, we enroll them primarily on probably the email addresses for the county.
Right. All county employees are enrolled by their email address. So we have, somewhere around 4,500 of just employees, and they're not included in the overall contract amount. That $29,000 to $30,000 is purely for residents. And we're looking at that constantly. That's the contracted number that we can do. We can certainly, increase that in the future when we can apply for additional grant funding.
And again, the final phase will probably roll out sometime in the next 6 to 9 months, and that'll be where folks who do not have any internet or email address access could sign up for it. But we're just doing it in a 3-stage type process.
Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Thank you, Melissa.
Members of the Court, we could go to item D. This concerns a briefing on the District Court Records Archives Fee and District Court Records Technology Fund. Mr. Wilder is here to address the Court at this time. Don't be shy.
I see the hour is approaching a late hour,
Thank you, Tom.
and I will attempt to be brief. Tarrant County has a rich history. Don't have to tell the court that, but a nice chunk of that history is in its court records. When this court approved an imaging plan that I presented to it back in 2002, 2003, it did not include any provision for the older records for which we have no backup and which are impractical to image under current technology very effectively. These are folded up like life insurance policies. I had brought a mock-up of that to the court in a previous budget year. Perhaps you remember. They were folded up. They were put in a sleeve. And what's happened, because they've been stored for decades in conditions that weren't all that great, you've got a permanent crease in these documents that makes it impractical to run through a sheet-fed scanner in our normal imaging process. District clerks around the state felt that if they could get some additional money, they could attack their older records problems, and that gives you some history of this. The legislature did authorize Commissioners Court to set a $5 fee that the court had the ability to levy or not levy, but also required the district clerk to come to the court during the course of the budget hearings and present a plan for the use of this money. We believe that we'll be able to do that, and that we can go and not only create a backup for these records that we don't currently have, but certainly the more historical records, we have a process in place for our other records that we're keeping the paper records, even though we destroyed well over 100,000 court cases. We would be able to keep some of these old historical records in paper too, and destroy the rest. So that's sort of the highlights of what we have in mind. I might mention the county clerk began, I believe, last year to utilize a vendor that injects moisture into the paper. This is out of one of her dedicated funds, and it flattens them out is what it does. And it also restores the moisture where the documents won't be as brittle, and so when they're handled, which they very often are handled, if you go over to our disposed records sections, you'll see stacks of them over there. They're ordered all the time out of the warehouse. So we'd like to get them imaged so that we don't constantly have to haul them and further impact their status, and also so that we can preserve them so we don't lose that ability of landmen, researchers, academics who constantly are looking at them. Any questions?
On this particular item, this is a new piece of legislation. It's not something where the court needs to take action now. In fact, we are encouraging you not to, because the statute requires that you take action during the budgetary process. It'll be treated as a special budget. The fee is up to $5. Mr. Waller believes that there'll be approximately $125,000 generated on an annual basis. Mr. Waller has to submit a plan to the court on how he's going to use those funds, and then any acquisitions concerning the $125,000 will be through the normal Purchasing Act acquisition. But we do want you to be aware of it, because we will be coming back to you during the budget process and asking you to approve this $5 fee.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Waller. We can now go to item E. This is the FY10 budget issues. Ms. Snyder is here to address the court. Let me start by saying that, as she makes her way up to the front, that last week we provided you with some non-ad valorem tax revenues. We also provided you with some material as related to perfected budget requests that have been submitted by the various departments. We said that we were going to bring this item, the expenditure piece, back to you. I will also remind you that those perfected budget requests have not been. We don't have the recommendations of Budget Office on those yet, but we did want to bring to you mainly those areas in the non-departmental area that are going to have the biggest cost impacts to the county. So with that, Ms. Snyder.
Actually, in order to pass difficult topics around to all the senior staff today, we're going to let Mr. Beecham handle this presentation. Last week, we gave you all the backup documentation for what we call the perfected budget requests from the departments. So now we want to kind of summarize some of that information for you. And you should have all of this information at your podium. Is that correct? There's some extra copies here that Mr. Manius is passing out. But to summarize where we are, compared to FY09, you can see there's a radical decrease in what the bottom line of the budget is. So then you start to ask yourselves why. Why is that? Well, primarily the biggest difference between the 2 years, being FY10 and FY09, is a decrease in capital. Back in April, when we made some preliminary presentations to the court, at that point in time, the court issued some advice to our departments, and that is basically no new positions and limit your capital needs. And I can tell you that the departments did listen to that information. Again, there's some summary of some increases and decreases there in the budget, capital being the biggest. There's a decrease in debt service this year, and that's primarily because we elected not to sell any new debt related to our CIP programs and transportation this year. There's $5 million worth of right-of-way funding. Now, that's not to give anybody alarm. There is $6 million in interest earnings from the transportation bond program that we'll be using for right-of-way needs for next year. And there's a detailed schedule behind here, so you can just see where our right-of-way is ending up for the next couple of years. I presented to you back in April the fact that there would be a projected $1.6 million increase in salaries for FY10 versus 9, and that is still absolutely still the case. Actually, it's around $1.4 million. But when we apply attrition, which we have done for my memory, forever. We don't budget salaries at 100%. For about the last 6-8 years, we've been using 98.5%. If we continue to apply that attrition rate, then that brings our overall salaries actually down under the current year. Now, let me tell you that this is something we've internally wrestled with, because in difficult years and as budget shrinks and as economies are bad, people don't leave their jobs either. We walk out our door of our office every day and see the postings on the HR for jobs, and yesterday there were 9. Now, we've seen it as low as 2 and 3. So continuing to apply that 1.5% attrition rate is still giving us concern, and ultimately we may back off of that. Then we look at some additional expense. We've talked about the new court in the past. We talked about health insurance. Let me just mention something about health insurance. While we've applied a 10% rate increase, which is something that we've been advised so far from the PEBC, and we've taken their data and analyzed it as much as we can, we also have some changes on the horizon for our group insurance as a whole. The Blue Cross plan will be merging, going away, and we'll merge our HMO with our EPO and PPO networks. We don't really know what kind of impact that's going to have as we go into the next year. It'll be a wait-and-see type year to see if it has a positive impact or a negative impact on our actual expenses related to health insurance. Just telling you that as a precaution. There's a large decrease in professional services from our IT department primarily. I was going back and forth between increases and decreases. The other thing I want to notice, we showed you a significant increase in our retirement rate. We projected $2.5 million back in April. As we actually got our actual retirement rate from the retirement system, is actually lower than what they gave us as a preliminary indicator. It actually, instead of being 12.1 to 12.5%, it's actually 11.85. And actually, we keep waiting for some little revision sheet to come from them, but that hasn't happened. If there's any questions about this information on this first page, obviously we'll be happy to answer them.
On the right-of-way, I'm trying to reconcile that back to page 3, and I'm not having a whole lot of luck.
Well, and I try to, and if you'll skip over to page 3, that information is there. I try to, you have to keep in mind that you're looking at a 2009 number is what they're going to actually project if they're going to spend this fiscal year, and it doesn't indicate their budget.
Okay.
Okay? And there is $6 million that we had thought, based on the information they had available at the time, potentially could be spent above and beyond this, which was included in the bond transportation fund. So those are, we know now for sure that those will continue to be available. And so that we can take $6 million of what we know, again, that's on the table this year for 10 and fund it that way.
Admittedly, I was not in the room when that was passed out, but I still need.
Oh, we are so sorry. Do we have one? Well, it was actually put up.
I think it's in that red folder.
It was put up there before court, sir.
It may be in that red folder, but I'm not sure.
I'm so sorry. Does that answer your question?
So if what we're saying, and I'm looking at again at page 3, are we estimating that we're going to spend approximately $7.7 million?
Correct.
That we'll have $6 million of interest, and that the net road and bridge requirements will be the 1.7, and that's what you're going to compare back to the prior year budget, which is resulting in the $5.1 million decrease on that first page.
Ultimately, that's correct.
Now, down at the bottom, where it talks about increased road and bridge subsidy, how does that work into all of this, the 1.1?
Of course, you got to think about the complexities behind the Road and Bridge Fund and their revenue resources also. We talked last week about we have a known decrease in revenues going into Road and Bridge Fund.
So what we're saying is we're having to move from general fund over to Road and Bridge, this 1.1.
To make up for those revenue deficiencies.
To cover not only this right-of-way, that's Road and Bridge versus right-of-way, okay. So it's the whole Road and Bridge.
Correct.
Cumulative budget of all the precincts.
Correct.
Is right-of-way actually included in that Road and Bridge part? Or
Yes, sir, it is.
Okay.
So we've always got to take those two pieces and think of them jointly, which is very difficult. There's no doubt about that. But not only are we looking at changes in expenses and changes in what's going on in our operations, but we got to look at the changes that happen in the funding sources too. And in Road and Bridge in particular, there was a $1.7 million decrease in funding for the our commission on the sales tax on motor vehicles. And then there also was a change in cash, beginning cash balances in Road and Bridge. Now, I'm going to emphasize, I mentioned this last week, and I'm going to mention it one more time. I think one thing that's put us on good footing this year is the fact that we've been very conscientious about beginning cash balances in the general fund. We know that we're going to have X amount of beginning cash balances every year because we have savings account, just like we all do at home. We have our reserves and what we call undesignated. So we know we're going to start with something. But we've been very conscientious about it taking any other amount in beginning cash balances and using those for one-time purposes, things that we know we can shut off and on. And that's capital. And that's obvious by what you're seeing here. We saw a significant decrease in our beginning cash balances, but we were able to accommodate that with some changes in our capital spending and recommendations. Page 2, I know we're flipping around, I apologize for that, but we spoke last week about some of our large expenses focus and congregate in what we call non-departmental, and we've given you non-departmental general fund here. Again, this is where you see our annual transfer for capital projects, so you see that decrease there. If there's any particular questions, we can give you an answer for.
So what we're saying there really is that we went from $31,600,000 of capital expenditures in 2008, originally budgeted $27.7, but are expecting to spend, well, we don't know what we're expecting.
We're going to transfer all of that because we do have anticipation of projects continuing. Some of those go to fund longer-term projects such as the Northwest Sub Courthouse. There's one project in particular that's kind of been stalled. In essence, that transfer happens equally throughout the year. It's 1/12 gets transferred to our capital projects funds. That's just a system that's in place.
Well, for example, we know we have $10 million on this building that we're not spending of that $27 million.
Correct.
But what we're looking at is so far, the requests for 2010 were 11.3, so that difference is the difference, but that 16.4 million is the difference between what was originally approved in 09 and what's been requested in 10.
Correct. Page 3, we've kind of discussed a little already. In essence, those are our projected right-of-way projects. And keep in mind that our right-of-way agents are in constant contact with the state on the state projects, taking into consideration and giving us as much information that they have on a regular basis. This is the most current. Questions? Last week, Judge Whitley started talking about reserves and undesignated. So we've given you a breakout here of how those funds are accounted for as of right now. And in the general fund we have between our reserves have been, unfortunately, at $16 million for a good number of years. And I say unfortunately from that standpoint because as our budget grows overall, then that percentage of our reserves shrinks. So it's been very, very stable for a good number of years at $16 million. We have between $3 and $5 million in undesignated. We consider $3 million to take care of those unknown things that are going to occur during the year because we all know they happen. We consider that a floor, that we shouldn't consider any much less than that. We have a small reserve right now, or an undesignated and non-debt capital, and then our self-insurance liability fund. Now, you notice that we've classified these separately because there are other funds that have dedicated purposes, and those are listed below the line there under dedicated special purpose funds.
Debbie,
Now, graffiti eradication, $544. That fund has been in existence for probably 10 years. So obviously we're not collecting a lot of fees on that one.
Our health insurance reserve, is that's not the $3 million there. Where is that shown in here?
Actually, it's not, and there's a note at the bottom of the page.
I thought it was around $6 million, so yeah. It's in the beginning cash?
We actually put all the resources for available expenditures in the health insurance fund. Now, maybe that's a flaw on our part, but it just makes all resources available in the event that claims exceed what we are transferring from ourselves and our employees.
But what you're accruing in that 10% increase that you talked about previously, you are accruing enough from your conversations with Diana and the group to pay what you think the claims will be for 2010, and if they miraculously hit exactly that amount, what you're telling me is you'd have $6.3 million still left over at the end of the year.
That would be correct. Now, let me mention this, that based on the information we received, the dollar amount that we've got in there for the county's portion right now is a hair under what those projections are. But again, it's one of those anomaly years. We don't really know what our actual expenditures are going to end up. We're hoping they come in less than they are this current year, less dynamically. But it's just one of those unknown things until we get a year of this transition under our belt. Now, I will also, Pat, mention that probably a good 10 years ago, it's been a while because it really got our attention and we learned some lessons from it. About 10 years ago, we were in the position where the health insurance fund ran short. Claims exceeded the money that was coming in there. And it almost depleted our undesignated in the general fund to correct that problem. So we're very conscientious of not biting ourselves in the foot from a reserve standpoint.
The Section 125 forfeitures, $1,064,000, that does not include the forfeitures from...
It doesn't include the forfeitures that we just recently received. And that was around $288,000.
And that would have been 08 forfeitures?
It's actually 08. Is it 07? Yes, you're right. It's 07. They are officially a year behind. That started about 3 years ago, and declaring or telling us what our forfeitures are.
And I would like to urge us to remember, and if maybe you and I and Tina all try to remember by the time we get to the meeting, we will, one of us, be able to remember to ask why Flex Plan is why they're a year behind.
Right. Now, I can tell you that I know for a fact that the auditor's office is very diligent staying on the EBC to get that information. They simply have been unsuccessful.
We need to work on that. So we know that it doesn't reflect the 288 from 07 if we, and that could be a dangerous assumption, but if we because we did change
There's a change
in 08 to allow for the spillover to occur, or really for you to be able to put claims in on 08 all the way to March 31st with turn-in all the way to May 31st.
Right. Even the forfeitures we received recently, which were the 2007, were lower than what we've seen in the recent past. But they were lower.
Yeah.
And we do dynamically, since there was 15 months of which you could actually submit claims against 08's forfeitures that the employees kicked in, and the county. Potentially, it could be even less than the 288 we received.
And we don't have a whole lot of, I don't think, direct statistics to show this, but I believe that the majority of that money that is being forfeited is the $240 that the county gives to each employee who participates in their, it's not just the employees that participate in the health plan. Does everybody get that $240?
It's clearly not money the employees are putting in.
Yeah, the only time I've ever forfeited funds, it was ours.
Yeah.
And whether it's the 240 or the opt-out money, that's the two pieces that go in that are usually left.
Any other questions?
The last piece of information there is the schedule for the activity that will happen for the balance of the year in the budget process. There are some key dates on there that you do need to put on your calendars. Most of those, fortunately, are already on Tuesdays, so we know you'll be here anyway, but it's a matter of setting that outside tax rate, approving the budget, and so forth.
perspective, Mr. Manius, there are certain of these that, and I'm sure you may have them already.
Are you talking about when the court will be meeting and when they will not?
I mean, the 10th is a definite date that we have to, and aren't there certain dates that all of us have to be here in order for us to do this?
Whenever we set the tax rate.
Tax rate days, being the effective tax rate, the outside tax rate, and the final tax rate.
Yes. So that would be September the 19th. The outside tax rate, we don't have to be here for the August 10th, but setting the outside rate, which you have down for...
The August 10th is the budget hearings.
Right.
Right.
And that's
I
the
guess
only-
we do need to be here for that.
That's the only non-Tuesday, by the way.
Okay, that week of, okay. All right. Any other questions?
I have a bit of news that's taken a little burden off of my shoulders. The first granddaughter will be born no later than August 4th.
Well, that is good. I was becoming a little nervous about how we were going to do this without you.
It's no longer the day before the hearing, so.
Did you have to go and bribe the doctor significantly?
No, I had no influence whatsoever.
Yeah. We all believe that.
On the August 25th meetings, that's right in the middle of our tax.
Yeah, in fact, we have said we would not be meeting that day.
Okay. So it's posted on here, so that's the reason I am.
So all that is that's a publication in the paper, is that correct?
Some of those are just informational.
We factored in those 2 dates that you only given us.
Okay.
Your Honor, that's all we have at this time.
Is there any other discussion or questions regarding that? Is this any other? I know that that you received, each of us received the requests. Any other information that at this point in time you think you're looking for or might need between now and August 10th when we start?
Well, I want to see what Debbie's proposing to cut.
You're right. That was supposed to be delivered to us by the 1st of August?
First part of August, yes. 1st of August.
1st of August. Okay. Being no other questions, then the Commissioners' Court will now recess the open session and proceed to closed session to discuss items exempted under Sections 551.071, 072, 074, 076, and 087 of the Texas Government Code.
Your Honor, at your convenience.
Probably ought to get a couple more in here. I mean, it's never stopped me before, but... Having returned from closed session and there being no business at this time, we stand adjourned.
There ought to be, would there be a discount for incumbents of less than 1,000?